Welcome to Mindful with Minaa, where we explore how mindfulness can enhance your relationships and well being. I'm your host, Mina B., a licensed social worker, mental health educator, and author. Through insightful discussions, I will guide you towards self awareness and self efficacy, empowering you to effectively manage your relationships, reduce burnout, and be more present with yourself. So let's jump into today's episode. Hello, community. I'm really excited about this episode because what sparked it is me just doing a lot of reflective work related to my childhood and how it shaped me as an adult. And so I want to talk about three things that I wish my parents taught me. I come from a very unique family system. I am the youngest of 13. I come from a blended family, and so I am my mother's second child, and I am my father's 12th child. And growing up in an environment with so many siblings, and my father had me at a later age. So he was 55 when he had me, but my older siblings are about 20 to 30 years older than me from my father's side. So I feel like there's a lot to unpack there around family and what it's like growing up in a really large family system, especially a blended family unit. But I think I'm going to have to unpack that in a completely different episode because there's just so much to touch on. But for this one, I want to spend some time just thinking about the things that I really wish my parents had instilled in me from young, but I had to find these things out as an adult. And I am happy that I did figure it out. And I'm curious to know if some of you relate, because I think these are things that are extremely essential to just taking care of our mental health and caring for our well being. And so the first lesson that I really wish my parents would have taught me as a child was to not treat people's opinions as truth. Now, before I go on any further, one of the things I knew, well, at least did a lot of work around in therapy and just what I know as a therapist about intergenerational trauma is the reason why my parents didn't teach me these things is because nobody taught it to them. And so growing up, I feel like I lived in a household where my parents really taught me to care a lot about what people thought of me. And to some regard, I feel like I understood it, especially as a Black woman living in a racialized world. At the end of the day, people are going to have judgments about me before I open my mouth. They're socially conditioned to have negative concepts and negative ideologies about who I am. But it wasn't until I became an adult that I was just like, well, I can't do everybody's anti-racism work. And so even if they have an opinion about me, whether it's about me being a Black woman or something else, like that is outside of my control. And I really wish my parents understood that. But I am grateful that on my journey, I learned to understand that myself. And so I want to offer that to you. I want you to think about the different ways that you treat people's opinions as truth and where that's coming from and why. And I want you to think about, did your parents teach you to care a lot about how other people perceived you? One of the things that we have to understand is that opinions are subjective and they may not always reflect reality. They may also not reflect our values. You can go to someone and ask them for their opinion, but their opinion is going to be rooted in their own belief system as well as in their own value system. So sometimes people have good intentions about the things that they share with us or the ideologies that they have that they pass off as advice. But you have to use discernment to know, is this applicable to my life? Is what this person is sharing with me, is it applicable to where I'm trying to be and who I want to become, my values, my belief systems, and what I desire? That is what is extremely important because it can be really easy to hear someone have a particular opinion and assume that it's fact. And so I really encourage you to be thinking about what it looks like to make informed decisions rooted in your own belief system, as well as ensuring that if you are going to take advice from other people or you're going to seek the opinions of others in your life, are you even aligned? And I think that is something that I had to learn as an adult. That again, as I've been saying, that I wish my parents unpacked for me, but I think they had to go on their own journey to learn that as well. And so now here I am on my own journey, understanding that, some people are just going to have an opinion that is rooted in their own reality, but what they perceive as reality may not line up with what I perceive as reality. Now, the second thing I wish my parents would have taught me is probably going to be extremely relatable to many people. I really wish my parents taught me the importance of setting boundaries. I grew up in a home where I was not allowed to say no. I grew up in a home where I don't feel like I really was allowed to express myself or have an opinion. I think when I did, I was always greeted with some form of hostility or just being shut down and told what to do. I was never given options. I just think that my parents never really helped me understand what limits are. And I really wish that I knew that from young. I really wish that I felt comfortable with setting boundaries from young. And I had to do a lot of that work on my own. And I will say, like, I felt very comfortable having boundaries with certain people in my life from childhood because from young, I just remember being exposed to a particular family member who was pretty unwell, and I just never felt good around them, and so I always had to establish limits with them, but it was really just with them. I didn't know that I could do this with other people, and honestly, it took me becoming an adult to realize that I can also set boundaries with my parents. My father is no longer alive, but even now as an adult, I am still setting boundaries with my mother so that we can establish a sense of security and safety in our relationships, and also helping her understand that I am an adult who is autonomous and I have my own agency. And there are things that I cannot take on or want to do. And there are just certain limits that I have that when I was 5, that would have been stripped from me. But now I'm an adult and I have to be very, very firm with it. And so I want to encourage you to think about the boundaries that you need to set. One, I want you to think about who in your family system do you need to set boundaries with? And there's something that I really want you to think about. A lot of us have heard the term no is a complete sentence. And yes, although I agree with that, I also think no requires a dot, dot, dot in certain relationships. What I mean by that is that sometimes explaining your boundary is essential because an explanation is a courtesy. And I think that there are some people in our lives who deserve that courtesy. But I also think there are certain people in our lives who need an explanation so that they could understand how they're showing up in our relationships and why this boundary is essential. No might really be helpful when your supervisor is like, oh, well, can you do overtime this weekend? No, I can't do overtime. But when you have that one particular family member who is always behaving a particular way and trying to cross a particular boundary, I think it's important for one to name what the boundary is and express it. But two, it can also be important to share with them why this boundary is being enforced now. Because sometimes in our family system, people are going to do what they've always have done, and sometimes we need to explain to people, like, I need you to understand how I perceive you. I literally need to hold up a mirror so that you could see yourself and your behaviors. And I need to unpack how this impacts me. I need you to fully understand this. And so remember that no relationship is equal. And with our family system, if you feel like there is someone who is really dysfunctional, somebody who has a lot of toxic behavioral patterns, it could be essential for your own comfort to be able to explain to them, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing, but I'm still going to be firm in the boundary, even when you try to push it, even when you say you don't understand, even when you disagree and say, well, I don't see myself this way, or I disagree with you. At the end of the day, I still need to be firm with whatever my boundary is. Now, the last thing that I wish my parents would have taught me is the importance of asking for help. I grew up in a home where my mother was very counter dependent. And what that basically means is someone who was closed off from help, someone who doesn't delegate, someone who kind of has a wall up and doesn't let people in, someone who is very focused on achievements, focused on doing productivity, being busy, and often feels a lot of shame around needing assistance. And I know that that in some way is my mother's own trauma response, but I do know that as a result of not seeing my parents seek help when I knew they needed it, I didn't know how to do that either. So I grew up the strong friend because a lot of people just always thought I had my life together. And in many ways, I kind of felt like I had no choice but to be strong. I didn't feel like weakness was an option. And I think because of some of the things that I faced in life, I always felt like, well, if I am not strong, things are going to crumble. So as an adult, I've learned to reframe this, and I want you to learn how to reframe this as well if this is your struggle. Number one, interdependence is what we need to be striving for. Interdependence is being self sufficient and knowing how to care for yourself as an adult, but also understanding that we're biologically wired for relationships and for connections. And so we need community because we can't do everything by ourselves. We literally need people. And so knowing how to rely on people, knowing how to invite people into your life, while also knowing how to be self sufficient is what it means to be interdependent. And I truly believe that interdependency is valuable. It's community care. It's how we bridge self care to community care. And so I really encourage you to be thinking about the different ways that you force yourself to be strong. Because often when we're forcing ourselves to be strong, we don't realize that we are kind of making mistakes, or we don't realize that because we can't be everything to everyone, we're stretching ourselves thin. And that is how we deplete ourselves. And that is how we end up feeling exhausted in everything in life. We feel like people are taking and taking and chipping away from us because we are not saying to them, hey, I don't have anything to offer. I don't have anything to give. Think you see how this is boundary work? But this is also saying, because I don't have anything to give and I'm so depleted, I'm asking if you can pour into me right now because I am in a deficit and my cup is empty and I need to be poured into. I need someone to invest in me the way I am always investing in others. And so learning to ask for help is super, super essential. Number one, asking for help is a sign of strength. And that is because when you ask for help, it shows that you are practicing wisdom and discernment. When you ask for help, you have understood that this is a task that you cannot complete on your own. And the wise choice to make is to invite others in that process to do the work for you, or to at least hold your hand while doing the work because you recognize that you are lacking something and you need the other piece to the puzzle. Okay. And so we have to remember that we exist within an ecosystem. And there are going to be times where I need something and I'm lacking, and I need to use the people in my community because that is how we move forward together. And so asking for help is actually a sign of wisdom and discernment. Now, I want to take the time to dive into some reflection questions so that you can be thinking about these three lessons in your own life. One, I want you to be thinking about what are the things that you wish your parents taught you? What are some things that you had to learn as an adult? I also want you to unpack if there is some resentment there and how can you engage in compassion and empathy by understanding their story and recognizing that it's possible they didn't teach you these things because they weren't taught these things either. In the same way that you get to engage in resources to care for yourself, maybe these resources weren't available to your parent, they didn't know where to look, and maybe there was some shame or guilt or other emotional barriers that took place as to what stopped them from knowing better. And so, one, I want you to just think about what do you wish they would have taught you? And is there some resentment attached to that? And how can you unpack that resentment through empathy and compassion? Now, going back to the three things that I talked about, the first one about opinions, I want you to ask yourself, how can you learn to differentiate between opinions and objective truth? What opinions are you holding on to right now that you realize this doesn't align with my value system? This doesn't align with what I believe in myself. This opinion actually is not fact, but I've literally took this person's opinion and made it a rule in my life. And I'm abiding by this thing, but I'm frustrated, I'm sad, I'm angry because I keep telling myself that this person's opinion is factual and it's how I'm supposed to live. How can you give yourself permission to break free from that? The second thing I want you to think about is your boundaries. So, again, who are the three people in your family system that you need to set boundaries with? And I want you to ask yourself, why is it important for you to have boundaries in this relationship? And the reason why it's important for you to unpack that is because guilt makes us feel that we're doing something bad. And depending on the family system that we were raised in, we can be conditioned to believe that we're doing something bad, even though we're doing something that is healthy. So, why is it important for you to set boundaries with these three people? And every time you feel guilty about this boundary, I want you to go back to your why. And lastly, I want you to ask yourself, how can you seek support and see that as a sign of strength? Remember, asking for help is an act of wisdom. You are being wise when you seek help and when you seek support. So, how can you reframe the way you see help? And how can you use wisdom and discernment so that you can start to delegate tasks, but also invite people into your life to help you flourish? So, as you think about the things that you wish your parents would have taught you, remember that even though they didn't pass down these skills or this knowledge, you have the power to do things differently. You have the power to disrupt the cycles of dysfunction in your family, and the cycle stops with you. That's all for today's episode. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed what you just listened to, please take a moment to rate and review this podcast on your preferred platform. Also, don't forget to share it with a friend and on social media. To stay connected with me and my work, follow me on social media and subscribe to the Mindful with Mina newsletter, which can be found on my website, www.minab.com. You can also continue learning from me by ordering my book, Owning Our Struggles, which is available at all major book retailers. Stay tuned for a new episode next week, and most importantly, remember to be present and stay mindful. Take care and goodbye for now.